Hi, I'm Namit Malhotra, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Buddha and says, "Your work is to discover your work, then with all your heart to give yourself to it." Namit Malhotra started with just one Apple Mac in a Mumbai garage. Today he's the chairman and CEO of DNEG, one of the most dominant forces in visual entertainment. As a third-generation filmmaker, Namit's relentless pursuit of innovation took his company Prime Focus from humble beginnings to the National Stock Exchange of India just 10 years later. Under his leadership, DNEG has grown to over 9,000 employees, earning 7 Academy Awards. His team has shaped some of Hollywood's most groundbreaking films, including Inception, Interstellar, and Dune. In this episode, we're going to talk about the secret to winning at the highest level, how to thrive in high-pressure environments, lessons from the world's most visionary filmmakers, and how to build a global powerhouse from a garage startup. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life, so there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Namit Malhotra. Namit, my friend, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Good to be here, James.
Well, to kick things off, is there a story of struggle or success from when you were younger that helped put you on the path that you ultimately went down?
It's fair to say it's the story of aspiration. I was so young when I started that I don't think I had the concept of struggle or success even really understood. I was all of 18 when I actually started out in that little garage. I went for a little computer graphics course, discovered the art of animation and CGI. And very quickly, I realized I wasn't very good at it. And I actually brought on board the 3 guys who taught me computer graphics, who were my teachers, to be my partners in building this little startup. And that's where we began. I was all of 18. They were all of 21. And we just got rolling, learning page by page, one step at a time as you would do in a school. And that sort of has been the journey of my life.
I love that. Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich talks about the power of the mastermind, that you don't need to have all the answers yourself, but you were able to get your teachers to recruit them into your business to be able to do the work, to get the result without having to wait year after year after year to finally be ready.
I think, it comes from, an innate understanding of sometimes knowing your weaknesses. The fact that I didn't know how to do that stuff well enough. And they could actually make me create Mickey Mouse walk on a computer. I was like, if they can make me do it, these guys must be really talented. So while I continued to realize that wasn't my area of strength, but the belief in their talent sort of gave me the impetus to actually bring them on board. And that, I think, is a big part of how you sort of succeed, because you not only have to be great at what you do, but you also have to know what you're not good at and how you surround yourself with people who actually can help compensate, if not make sure that they can do a better job than you can. And that is a big part of how you put together a team and how you really make it happen.
And where did the confidence for you come from to start a business? Were you just not overthinking it, or was it as a result of being a third-generation filmmaker?
If I go back a year or two before that, I actually was a DJ. Just having finished not even high school. So a friend of mine and I just sort of got together and set up a little DJing shop, and that was my way to earn pocket money. But I was clearly aspirational to be a film director. I wasn't thinking about post-production or visual effects or CGI. I was much more driven to be a filmmaker. And, my grandfather was a cinematographer. My father's a film producer. And I thought, how do I do something different? And I said, I want to be the storyteller. I want to be the director who sort of puts it all together. And that sort of was my motivation until I got some good sage advice from my father. The path to being a filmmaker can be sometimes pretty treacherous. You can go through a lot of back and forth. You can be making great movies that may not work. You could make not so good movies that work. You could, getting financing, distribution. These are difficult things. She said, why don't you do something more stable and hopefully more secure? You set up a little company, build a stable business. And then the filmmaking business is always evergreen. Like, you can be a filmmaker. The film business does not discriminate on age or experience in that sense. So whenever you're ready, you make your move back in. And that's sort of what I listened to my father at that age when most teenagers don't. And I think that's really worked out well.
And were you inspired by Bollywood or Hollywood or both?
Actually, I was inspired by both. I was clearly grown up in a Bollywood film family, so there was a lot of excitement and inspiration, being on a movie set at a very young age and seeing some of the biggest stars sort of in front of your eyes was a great moment to sort of see them going from the big screen to a set and back onto the big screen. It's a great moment for a young person. And then, I saw Jurassic Park in 1993, and I remember being blown away. I was like, how do they even think about this? Needless to say, Spielberg being absolute master of the craft. But for me, what was more intriguing as an aspirational filmmaker was, how do you even think about it? And that sort of really got me excited to start imagining that the possibilities are endless and beyond what one can do and what one can achieve. And that's sort of where the germ for being a CGI company really took shape, because I was really inspired by what I saw.
And how was life in Mumbai? I've been to India before. I've spent a few weeks there. Such an interesting difference in that the gap is so big between the poor and the wealthy there. What was an average day like in Mumbai when you grow up?
So I think we kind of grew up in a pretty middle-class surrounding in the suburbs of Mumbai. And, I can safely say that one has no regrets. In fact, I think we were blessed to have the best childhood. You sort of saw people with wealth and you saw people with nothing much at all, sort of co-mingling together. And that was a pretty interesting dynamic to sort of grow up in, where, while you see that disparity, you also see people are, it doesn't need one or the other to be happy. How you can sort of interplay different castes, different religions, different social, economic, profiles, all sort of playing together, I think is a very interesting way to sort of grow up as a young person. And I won't replace that for anything else in the world. And I think that was really instrumental in building my foundation as a person.
Were you a big cricket fan growing up?
Yeah, I was certainly not a great cricket player, but I had my favorites, and if you're an Indian, you can't not be a cricket fan. So
yeah, India and Australia have had some good battles on the cricket pitch before. Did you continue to try and focus on learning the technical side of that business, or were you focused more on improving your skills on business management and business growth?
So, it's an interesting dynamic, and I like the question because, our business is unique in a sense that we are a creative-led business that relies on technology with a fixed financial model. And what that basically means is that the creative aspect is subjective, technology is constantly moving, and the financial piece is like the client sort of sitting with you and saying, I have $100,000 and that's all I got, make it happen. And you're relying on these two variables, which are both beyond your control. And I found over the years, as I discovered the details of my business, that most people have two of these skill sets on a good day. 3 on 3 is almost impossible, where you have a creative mind and a technologically capable, understanding to be great with numbers. It's a pretty complex dynamic. For me personally, because I was blessed to have been born in a film business, I feel like I was creatively already, some of the sort of mainstream DNA was already there in terms of understanding storytelling, and filmmaking sort of came naturally. I was good at maths as a kid. So, like a lot of Indians are good mathematically. So I thought I was good with finance, and technology was what I really learned. So I signed up for lots of courses, from computer graphics to programming to electronics and assembling systems, so that I actually, as I mentioned earlier, that recognizing some of your own weaknesses and working towards it, I think turns into a strength. Very quickly, I realized that with my very little qualification, I was able to sort of really learn the nuances of each of these verticals, and through application, through practical experience. And that there is no second to that. And that is where I think I was able to get a good balance between the technology, the creativity, and the financial piece.
How do you feel then about young people today who don't use the resources at their disposal, things like YouTube and other ways that they can learn for free about just about any industry that you can think of?
I think it's less about the tools. It's all about what you want to do. I always speak to a lot of young people, and because I was very young when I started, and I've never had a boss. I've never worked for somebody. I've never done a job. So, I have a unique growing up life experience where I had to make every mistake myself to sort of learn it and step forward. So I say to a lot of young people, it's all about figuring out what your true calling is. And once you decide that that's what you want to do, fortunately, you're in a world today where everything is actually available at the press of a button. And that is, I think most people in today's time are confused because the opportunities are so many. There's so much you can do. There's so many options that you can pursue that I feel the young mind is sometimes confused between what path should I take? What track should what would give me the maximum pleasure, or where do I really want to be? And that, I think, is, again, your social environment is sometimes plays a big part in accelerating some of your decision making. And the more privileged you are, the less pressure you have to, let's say, make those choices.
What about helping get clearer on what that calling is? Is that where it's useful to go and find just interesting people that you can be an intern for, or look for mentorship, or just to put yourself in a room where maybe someone like you is speaking at an event where they can learn and have experiences to find out if this is something they resonate with?
So I think the real word is curiosity. You've got to be curious. And as a young person, if you're not curious, I think as older people, we should be curious, because the world is moving at such a rapid pace. So it's all about really figuring out, what are you curious about? What do you really care about? What's out there? Who do you want to be like? Like, there are lots of ways you can answer that question. Who do you aspire to be like? Without limitation. You can sort of be, whether you believe in Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, or, be a political leader of the world. You can today decide any which way you want to go and anybody you want to be. And then you can pursue that track. And that is sort of where I feel, people are a little misguided or not clearly aware of whether they're, and what you're willing to do for it. Because see, it's one thing that I only want to say to people of the world, and especially the youth. Before you receive, you got to learn the art of giving. What are you willing to give to get what you want? I think every individual has to sort of answer that. And in terms of giving, in terms of your time, in terms of your priority, in terms of your life, in terms of effort, in terms of sacrifice, what are you willing to give for what you want on the other side? And once you get that clarity, then it's just about just running down the road, and obstacles are opportunities. And then you just deal with it and get on with it, because you've already decided that I'm willing to do that. If you're a tennis champion, or if you're a athletic runner, you're going to have to put your life through a rigorous amount of training and testing. But you only do that because that's what your passion is. That's what you really love. And then anything that comes, whether you get injured or you lose, it's just another opportunity for you to learn and step ahead on. And I think that's sort of what I would say to all the youth of the world, that just figure what is it that you're willing to give so you can receive.
I was going to talk about this later, but I think this is great timing. Having won 7 Academy Awards, which is just so interesting. A lot of athletes, they make it to the Olympic Games and their life is a mess afterwards because their entire life has been training for one specific event. But once you won that Academy Award, what was it like? Back to the tools, let's just continue on the creative work? Or what was the sort of sense within the team and within you as a leader like?
So, the danger of winning is that winning is a drug. And when you win, it sort of creates a whole new reality of pressure. You start out with an aspiration of, I hope I can win that one award once. And then when you start winning, you can't imagine you not winning, or imagining that now you will lose is terrifying to any winner. I think if you ask anybody in the world, they'll all attest to that. That, after having gotten to a stage of victory, to see yourself not be able to recreate that success, or not be able to, hold on to that capability is incredibly terrifying. And that is where I feel a lot of adrenaline and a lot of confidence comes, because you're like, now we've proven it. Are we just one time lucky? Can we do it again? And then you do it for the second time. You do it for the third time. And, we're nominated for our 8th Academy Award this year for Dune 2. And there's a lot of people in my team who are like asking me this every day, like, how does it feel? Do you feel like are we going to win? Are we not going to win? And I'm like, we've won 7, 6 in the last 9 years is a record in the world. Nobody has won that. So let's take it easy. We've worked as hard as we could. The work is exemplary. People will decide. And if we win, fantastic. If not, we know we're good. We'll try harder next time, or we'll make sure that we get other opportunities that make it happen. So it's a bit of a, ultimately the award is just a validation of your effort.
So the outcome is far less important than the process.
That's what, it's not like if we didn't win the Oscar for Dune 2, does that make the work any less good? No, absolutely not. It's terrific work. Everybody that's worked on it should be incredibly proud. And if we win and others don't, it's not because they did bad work. It's just, at that given moment, they've also done great work to be in that mix of those 3 or 5 top people in the world. And everybody loves to win. But I say, you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world. As long as you're playing your best and you're in the best zone of your effort, the victory will happen.
I love that. Taking your own business to be listed on the Indian Stock Exchange, what were some of the biggest things that happened in that 10-year period to lead to that success?
So it's a very interesting journey because, I started out as a garage company. We founded on debt. We would never get equity capital. We would not get VCs in India back in the day to fund. So in the world of startups of today, we actually had to borrow money from the bank. My father had to put our house on the line. As an 18, 19-year-old, you're writing personal guarantees and you're putting your house on the line because that's the only way you can buy a computer whose value we all know diminishes in 12 months. So if you don't succeed, you've basically completely destroyed whatever sort of family wealth you have or whatever you've got. And that's a massive responsibility and pressure for any young person to take. And then as we sort of grew and became incredibly successful, we got to a place where, it felt like the only way we could actually take our business from India and take it to the world was to go public because, we wanted to have currency. We wanted to have visibility and credibility so that people in America and the UK and other places that saw our industry in a very distant manner. It was not a business that had proven itself or an industry that had proven itself. So being a public company, I thought would give us a lot of credibility, like people would take us more seriously, that we're a legit business. We're not just a fly-by-night, and we've not just come into America or the UK as this little Indian startup that's so far away from the world. When internet wasn't necessarily out and about in people's hands, it was a much different time. And so that is where the idea to go public happened. Every big event has its own stories. The Monday, the day before the IPO happened, it was the hottest time in the Indian capital markets, where we had every other company was being oversubscribed 40 to 60 times. And the day I opened my IPO and I was in Mumbai after doing my trade shows all over the world, I come back to Mumbai, I'm in my press briefing, and it's called the Black Monday. The market tanked 1,000 points. And all the press ran from my press conference to sort of figure out what's happening in the capital markets. And what was meant to be a glorious capital markets event turned into be an absolute damp squib, and we had to really work hard in somehow getting over the line. Fortunately, I had great investors backing me, so we came through on the other side, but it was not the outcome we expected, or it was just timing, nothing we could do. So that happened, and then before you know it, a year later, we were up 500%. Like it was like a absolute challenge, and then we were up, and then again we had the writer strike and the actor strike of 2008 and the Lehman crisis. So I've seen a lot of ups and downs, a lot of volatilities, and I'm like, okay, maybe that's a sort of a indicator of better times to come. And now these days, every time something bad happens, I'm like, okay, no problem. We've dealt with a lot of these crazy situations in our life, and it just makes you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that sort of is how we've continued to sort of plow ahead.
I feel like you've got a calming presence as a leader. I mean, even growing up, balancing, knowing that your family's house is on the line, you're trying to manage the team, work on your own skills. There's so many different things going on in that. You've been in the high pressure environment from day one, I feel.
Yeah, it's been relentless.
Yeah.
Like I always feel like it's only 30 years this January when I started. And it just feels like I haven't stopped running on the treadmill. For a fat guy, that's a bit hard.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational what the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. And what was the moment that you signed your first big client where you were like, wow, I'm really on the map here?
It's been different times where different things have happened. Obviously, there was the times in India when I had to really build myself up and really have a couple of breakthrough projects, which happened back in the early 2000s, when I started to work with some of the biggest film directors and some big commercial directors back in India. So each of those breakthroughs was a big leap forward in what we were doing. And then, after we walked into Hollywood, it was like 2000, we walked in end of 2007, the writer strike, the actor strike, and the Lehman crisis happened like in 6-8 months, and the whole industry and everything just came crumbling down. And that's when we were called in, because we had worked on a film called Journey to the Center of the Earth in 3D, and James Cameron was just making Avatar 1. And that's when we signed on to be a small player in Avatar 1, and that was a massive saving day for us, because the business was all falling apart. All that talent that we had was all sort of dissipating because there wasn't much work. And then Avatar came, and then the whole industry just revived, and 3D revived, and we were just, from being almost dead, we sort of came back up.
I remember watching Avatar in the cinema. That was just one of those things that just everyone knew it was just going to completely revolutionize. It almost reinvigorated the entire cinema market. At the time, the big screen TVs were starting to get more and more popular, and Avatar came out. And everyone was like, wow, this is such just an amazing experience.
Absolutely. And there's no one like James Cameron, obviously, because single-minded determination to make, visions and stories that are, unprecedented in that sense. And he's obviously got the record for that. But, it just created a whole new ecosystem. It just created, and it spurred so many more filmmakers to leverage technology like 3D and really get out there, really make a difference. And that sort of became our calling card for what happened subsequently.
Do you want to share some of the amazing filmmakers that you've been able to work with, and perhaps a lesson from each of them, if anything comes to mind?
So I was just talking about, filmmakers like Spielberg that inspired me, James Cameron that we worked on Avatar with. And then obviously my favorite filmmaker in the world is Christopher Nolan. He's absolutely the most stellar, one-of-a-kind director that I believe I've ever seen. I compliment him all the time because I feel like he's one filmmaker who's so precise in his vision, in his execution, never going over, always on time, always spectacular quality of storytelling from the script, screenplay, music, cinematography, editing, directing. It's just a unbelievable experience, and we've had the great privilege of working with him for the last almost 20 years and continue to be part of his team. So I think that's one filmmaker that I personally have a tremendous regard for in terms of how he has really catapulted himself in his own way, in a very disciplined and in a very organized manner to really deliver stories that are beyond common line of storytelling. And then he brings something so fresh and different to each film that he brings on that I think is pretty spectacular. And then obviously there's Denis Villeneuve that we won a few Oscars with, and he's again a source of tremendous talent, and what an impeccable vision and artistry that he has. I've loved Tarantino growing up. I love his Maverick and very out there. Like he can do things that you think for a second as a filmmaker, like, oh, maybe that's not going to work. And he can just take you out there and put the camera in a particular place or in a particular way and have characters do stuff that is just mind-blowing. The list is endless. There are some fantastic filmmakers in India. Hitesh Tiwari is a great filmmaker. He made a film called Dangal. Have tremendous regard for his simplistic yet very powerful storytelling. Ayan Mukherjee, another director I collaborated very closely with, impeccable young talent that shows great promise for bringing big scale filmmaking. Rajamouli, who made RRR, Sanjay Leela Bhansali, Aditya Chopra. There's a whole bunch of filmmakers that have inspired me over the years. And needless to say, Mukul Anand, he was the guy who, after seeing his films, I wanted to be a director. So, that different filmmakers over the course of my life have really inspired me to sort of learn and see how we can do better in being more aligned to their vision and style of storytelling, because that's ultimately the holy grail for us. So we are only as successful as we can translate their vision into cinematic excellence, and that needs us to be always listening to them and learning from what their vision is and what their real calling is. And that sort of is critical to the culture of the company we've created.
So probably the biggest challenge for you then is really understanding as much as you can the vision of the director.
Oh, without question.
Yeah,
Like
which
that-
is hard. So what are they showing you? It's not just words on a page. Are there other things that they're...
No, I think over the years, when we have those words on a page and we have the director explain what their real aspiration is, what they want to really communicate in that moment in terms of emotion, in terms of not just the spectacular world that we got to make or something that is cool to design. I think that all comes second. It's really about the intent of the filmmaker in terms of what do they want to communicate to the audience at that point? How do they want the audience to feel? Like, what is it that they want to ensure that you're feeling and experiencing from the lens of the filmmaker has got? And that really helps us then design and execute that aspect of what is being asked of us. And that is, to my mind, the simple truth and the most difficult part of really getting that right. Once you lock that in, then you're going to be able. Then it's a matter of iterating it to perfection, which I think the teams and the people have a great understanding of. But otherwise, it's really trying to communicate that. So we make a film for Mr. Nolan like Interstellar. You're talking about creating something that the world of science doesn't have. How does light travel through the black hole or the wormhole, and what does that look like? And he brings on some pretty scientific geniuses like Kip Thorne and collaborates with DNEG and the leadership at DNEG to really create an outcome that is authentic, that looks real. And then more than winning an Academy Award, that work gets published in scientific journals as white papers, and you sort of realize that it's art leading science for the first time. So it's that sort of thing that is, unheard of. And that is the kind of stuff that we are able to create because you've got a filmmaker who's really challenging you and directing you to that limit. And that is like gold in our business.
So do you have it in your culture where you basically just need to say yes rather than like, no, we can't do that?
That I have to tell you, we just relaunched our branding for our company. And the tagline is, it says start with impossible. So what that basically says is, you come to us and say, this is impossible. It's never been done before. You can't do it. And that is exactly what will get us started. That's the starting point for us. Like the whole culture of saying, no, it cannot be done. That is alien to my company or my culture. That doesn't happen. We as an Indian company that grew up, in the 70s and 80s at the peak of being a third world, would never get here if we took no for an answer. Like we push against the tide. We make impossible happen every time. That's built into the DNA of now all the people that work here.
Real magic, bringing dreams to life.
Yeah.
I love that. Interstellar is one of my favorite movies of all time. Then I watched it a few years ago after I became a father. My first child is a daughter.
Sure.
And once you have a daughter, you watch Interstellar again. My God, it is so incredibly emotional and even more powerful after being in that moment. Was there a particularly challenging scene from Interstellar with Christopher Nolan, or a memorable one to take care of?
I think the whole aspect of, creating those vistas and those visions of, being in space and being in that part of the world that you've never really seen before. But making sure that everything that we do is sort of hiding behind the emotional graph of the connect the father has with his daughter and how he's really trying so hard to sort of make that connection with her as he's battling through all the challenges and the complexities of time and space. What becomes critical is that you can make something look really pretty and you can make something look really nice, but how do you make it authentic? And that is where I think no one like Mr. Nolan to really drive that sense of realism and authenticity. And so for us, when we're making those scenes, when they're in the spaceship and they see the world outside, or whether, he's falling through and he's sort of seeing his daughter behind the bookshelves. And like, those are all the scenes that come to my mind that needed an incredible amount of detail. And while it has the splendor, it doesn't take you away from the emotion of the scene. And that's the most important thing. I always say to people, visual effects is not the reason why a film is going to be connecting with the people. In fact, the more seamless we make it, the better or the more successful the film will be and the engagement with your audience will be.
I guess there was a classic case of Waterworld, which is a movie I saw a long time ago. It was such a big budget, but it looked like they put everything into that with less substance on the story, when you can even see films like Avatar, as you described there, that the world that they created was so incredible. It was perfectly integrated into the storyline. It wasn't you were just mesmerized by the world. You were part of the story. You were along for the ride.
No, I think Avatar is a great example because the whole use of 3D and the design of Pandora, where while it was absolutely spectacular and beautiful, but it was immersive. You actually felt like you were in Pandora. That is where you see the genius of the filmmaker to sort of really transport the audience to that place, to make you feel like you're experiencing that in front of you. And that is when something goes from good to great. And therefore, it's not just a pretty visual, it's your environment. It's what you're now believing. You're actually seeing those characters there and you believe like that's happening to them. And you feel for them and you have joy and you have tears and you really emotionally are on this roller coaster kind of going along for the ride. And that is what great masters of filmmaking, that's what they do.
And Inception, I feel like the movie just wouldn't have worked if it didn't have all of, like the streets sloping up. Just absolutely incredible.
That's again mind-boggling. Those are like absolute classics, so to say, in terms of how you blend, that sort of vision of storytelling with the cinematic use of visual effects and all the tools that go around it, whether it's practical effects, cinematography, music. In all those films, if you see, it's while, I'd love to just tell you it's all about the visual effects that we did, but all the other departments of, production design, cinematography, the music especially is really authenticates that moment and takes you to another level.
The emotional connection that it has. Like I listen to the Hans Zimmer live tour now just on Spotify, where he's playing a song that I listened to as a kid, like The Lion King, a movie that playing the song from that. It's so emotional hearing it like 30 years later. The power of music to be able to transform you back to that moment is incredible.
You're talking about another legend, another favorite of mine. There's no one like him. Like, I can just tell you that. In fact, I'll say this. So Hans Zimmer is also scoring on a movie that I'm producing. It's called the Ramayan, which is being produced by us, by me. It has Hans Zimmer and A.R. Rahman, who are both the Indian legend of music, who's also done a lot of Hollywood stuff, and Hans Zimmer coming together for the first time to really create this epic that we are in the middle of production. So it's a dream come true for me as a fanboy to sort of sit there and see Hans and then see AR, both really coming out with their genius master strokes of creating that music.
Yeah. Is the visual effects done in collaboration with the music sometimes, or are they always pretty separate?
They're pretty separate for the most part because, the visual design is much more an inspiration for the music. So you kind of give the guys who create the music a sort of a semblance of what's going to happen on screen. And then they got to really create the music to really go with that. And then that is sort of, again, Dune is a great example of Hans Zimmer and our visual effects sort of playing together across the whole film. And you see that the way you sort of feel immersed in that environment visually, but the sounds that you hear, again, it makes you feel like you're actually there or you're really sensing that emotion or what the characters are feeling and what's happening around you. So it's a very audiovisual, you're playing on two of our strongest sensory responses, and that is when it comes together seamlessly, I think it, again, makes it a classic or a great experience.
The content game more broadly, I think it was Tarantino a couple of years ago saying that he was a bit exhausted from all the Marvel movies and everything else. How do you continue to be able to do such incredibly impossible things but keep people anticipating that without feeling a bit fatigued?
The way I like to imagine this is that what people are looking for is something different. As long as you show them something different and they have a different experience, that's what people are excited about. Because if I'm going to give you the same thing every day, even if you like it, it's like the law of diminishing returns. The more you have something, the same thing again and again, the less you love it.
Even familiarity breeds contempt. I think about that all the time.
So those are the sort of ideologies on which I think, and in a creative, artistic business, you want to try and wow your audiences with something like, oh, you've not seen this before. And the beauty about where the technology and the artistry is at today is that we can do that. Like I always say to our filmmakers, if you can dream it, we can do it. So there is nothing here that prevents you from actually being able to get your vision on the screen. And so it just needs you to sort of go right, think, imagine, and come back with something that you feel is going to be cool and it can be done. So we live in great times in that sense. And that's where I feel like the responsibility of that is on every big filmmaker. Bring that next vision or experience for the audiences.
And what are you focused on running such a big, how many, is it more than 9,000 people that you've got working?
Yeah, it's almost 10,000 plus people globally.
Yeah. How many offices would you have?
We have close to about 20 offices worldwide.
How do you manage that entire process and keep everyone aligned and happy and productive and motivated?
I think one of the very first things, as I said, was that a lot of people who work in the industry, in what we do, are people who are really passionate about what they really like, the artistic form of storytelling. So the projects sort of motivate them. So every time, a Denis Villeneuve or a Christopher Nolan, sort of walk in and say, that's my next film, that creates the greatest amount of joy and enthusiasm, to be honest with you. That's really at the center of what it is. For my vantage point, is more about making sure we're organized, we're technologically up to date, and that we're able to manage the flow of projects and the flow of work in a more seamless manner. And that sort of is where I feel like having done this for almost 30 years, you sort of get used to that rhythm and the form of how it works. Needless to say, I do have a great team. My co-founders are still with me in the company 30 years later. And there are lifers of the company that have been there from this being their very first job. Some people 25, 28, 20 years later. So we've had a great following of a lot of good talent that sort of continues to believe in the innovation and the aspiration that we have to raise the bar. And they continue to keep it afloat for the most part. So I can't really take the credit beyond just providing the vision and really the confidence to all of them to just go and do it, and then they do it.
How do you split your time then? Are you mainly based in LA, or where are you based in?
So last 15 years, after that 2008 and 9 chapter, I did move to LA, with my wife and my kids, and we spent a good 5 years here in LA. We have a home here, and then we moved to London. And then just a couple of years back, we've slowly been moving back to India as we're producing some of the biggest pieces of content. And I also want my kids to get that growing up experience that I had as a child. So my favorite way to say it is that the question is, where do I live or where does my family live? Because I
ask myself that all the time.
I live between these countries, and I spend a lot of time, on a plane, traveling continent to continent and from studio to studio. But the family currently lives in Mumbai, and I keep going back and forth.
Yeah, that question about, do we live somewhere to help me fulfill my dreams, or do we live somewhere to give the kids the best chance at them fulfilling their dreams? I really think about that all the time.
Sure.
It's a very interesting question. And I think instinctively we want to give our kids the experience that we had with our own childhood, even if we may not necessarily have enjoyed every aspect of our childhood. I think there's a lot of uncertainty around having kids growing up in a situation where you don't really know what's going on, especially when you got up to a bit of trouble when you were young, as most kids did.
I also feel like, in the case of my kids, I can say they're incredibly fortunate to say LA was home, London is home, and India is home. It's like to have that growing up experience, I think, is unique. And it's not money and it's not privilege. It's actually just the ability to have moved and build friends, go to school, be part of a social ecosystem, where you become one with the local community, I think is a tremendous, opportunity. And I think that creates for the world to be a better place and for people to feel greater connection emotionally and otherwise. And I think that is where the world needs to go towards. So we cut down a little bit of conflict and feel more one with where we live. And, we don't necessarily create these geographical divides and political noise that continues to create a lot of upheaval in people's lives. But I feel like with the way technology is evolving and the way people are becoming more and more, I think that feeling of being more global is much more normal now. And I hope that the next couple of generations sort of really make these geographical borders less relevant and we live happily ever after, as they say.
Yeah, more unity than division. Yeah. I think that's good. What's the age range of your children?
My older one just turned 18.
Yeah.
And I have twin boys who are going to be 16 this year.
Oh, nice. How do you encourage them to stay motivated and do the reps, to put in the hard work while making sure that, you as a father, that you're not giving them too much, which means that they're too disconnected from the sacrifices that you made that built a lot of the family wealth and opportunity?
I'll give you a couple of anecdotes on that because it is a subject very close to my heart. So my older son's name is Ayrton, after Ayrton Senna, who's my hero. When he was born, I saw the race when Senna died on TV, of course, and he was an absolute legend, coming second as being the first one to lose. That was Senna's quote. And so very competitive, very prolific Formula One driver. So I've always spoken to my kids, including myself. I'm like, think of our life as a sports person. We're not business people. We're not here. We got to chase our passion. Somebody's a Formula One driver. Somebody plays football. Somebody plays cricket. Somebody's tennis, athletics, whatever. So I always say that because, when you're young boys, what do you love the most? You can just have a 4-year-old and just give a football and they'll be out there running around, and there's nothing more pleasurable for you to experience than some sort of a sport related adventure for the most people, for the most part. So I've always given them that perspective of being a sportsman. I talk about myself as a world champion in visual effects, saying I started from this garage and we built the world's #1 visual effects company. And I say that not with pride, but with the humility that for me, that's more valuable than being rich. The fact that we can be the best at something in the world is greater satisfaction. I give them the example. I said, had I been a realtor and been a real estate guy in Mumbai in India, I'd have maybe had 10 times my net worth and still been the 100th guy or 1,000th guy in the world in real estate, because there are giants in front of us. But in the little world that I'm operating in, I can comfortably say we're the largest and the biggest and probably the most awarded, successful player. I sort of give them that example of being like a sportsman and saying, if you're really good and if you're really on the top of your game, that's all that matters. So forget about everything else, because everything else is a consequence of your being good. The money, the fame, the adulation, everything is a function of how good you are in your domain. And as long as you pursue that domain, that's where you'll get happiness from. That's where you'll figure out your struggles and your obstacles, and that's where your motivation to solve them will come from. Everything else is actually a burden. So if you have privilege, like my kids have access to more money and a better life than I did, but I think that's a disadvantage to them. The fact that my father did not have the kind of resources that I have for my children actually gave me the opportunity to be more enthusiastic. So I say it openly to my kids that having more is not necessarily a good thing. It's finding what is it that is going to give you that excitement to build your own name, your own the best version of yourself is really what. And I said that's where a sportsman proves that all day long. There is no legacy. There's no football player's son or a Formula One's kid or a cricketer's son or a daughter that's going to really assume that just because I'm of this lineage, I'm going to get that. So that's where the fun comes from. You're going to be beaten by that kid who's hungrier and more passionate and more hardworking. And you try that in sport every day, and you will see that. And that's how I've tried to keep their minds more focused and excited about where they find the best aspect of their life and where they get the maximum pleasure. So it's fun. I have these conversations a lot with them, and I think it's a good way to sort of see the young generation also gravitate towards some of these concepts.
I love that, just the notion of what are you hungry for? One of the biggest issues that I see in the world with young people today is apathy. Like when I go and talk at universities and different things, there is a distinct apathy that they have about the world and their role in it. I'm like, just have some excitement, like figure out what you're hungry for. And what you were talking about there, almost like when people reach a certain milestone as well. Conor McGregor, the famous UFC fighter, there's footage of him at the Formula One in Monaco on this big fancy boat, using the gym and having all of the luxury surrounds. If there is a fighter coming up who doesn't have any of that stuff, he's worked so hard, he's got nothing else in his life, he's all in on his dream, then you're going to lose to that hungry person. So instilling that in your family and your kids about what are you hungry for? We don't care what it is, but what are you hungry for?
Exactly.
What are you hungry for?
And I'm like, that's where we will all get disrupted. I tell my team at the company, I said, when I was an 18-year-old and I didn't know anything about the business, and I started a company with the first 40 or 50 people that I hired also knew nothing about the business. They never had a job before. So that's the real startup success we had. And we disrupted and succeeded over all the established players. So I'm like, imagine the next 18-year-old like me who comes in and disrupts all of us. Because he will not take no for an answer. He would just go against the tide and make it happen. And that to me is what I constantly tell my kids and tell my team, that you got to make sure that you don't get disrupted. I did not think that we'd be here. I did not think I would be sitting here in Los Angeles talking to you and, reflecting back on this journey and what we've achieved when I started out. So, just because we're there, it doesn't mean we're supposed to be here. You got to keep earning your seat at the table, as they say. And that is the journey, and that's the spirit of a sportsman, like I keep referring, is absolutely critical to stay in success or stay in the running, as they say.
You seem to be the personification of the Ray Kroc quote where he talks about it's better to be green and growing than ripe and rotting.
Yeah.
Like always green and growing. I think it's really cool, all the stuff you're doing. For Mad Max, you built a standalone visual effects studio in Australia. Can you tell us a bit about that experience?
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. The pandemic was just on its way out, and one of our lead supervisors who worked on the last Mad Max film and has done the last couple of films with Mr. Nolan, Andrew Jackson, calls me one fine day and says, George Miller would like to talk to you and his producing partner about whether DNEG would like to come to Australia and build a studio. And I was like, I'd be more than happy to talk to them and figure out. And, again, these are all tremendous filmmakers, and, the kind of work, the body of work they've got is huge. And that sort of really precipitated a conversation. I spoke with his producing partner. We figured out a methodology and a way to really bring the tech and the creative capabilities of our company to Australia, and literally, use the pandemic and the years after to set up this brand new studio in Sydney, which on record, I have not visited yet. So I haven't been to Australia yet, even though it's one of our fastest growing and most successful studios. And, the work coming out of there and the teams are outstanding. And that all happened because Furiosa became that opportunity for us.
We've got a good team of actors down there as well. People like the Hemsworth family and Hugh Jackman and Margot Robbie. And doing very good things for Tourism Australia.
Sure.
That's for sure. What are you working on now that you're most excited about?
I'm producing a film called The Ramayan, which is the greatest story of Indian culture that goes back 5,000 years. That is, for me personally, my dream being fulfilled, of becoming a creative, collaborator and partner in that entire journey of bringing that to the life and bringing it to the world is the ultimate goal. So that's personally incredibly exhilarating for me, because I'm actually now working on all the areas of whatever I've learned and really putting it together in the telling of that story and in the telling of that, of what I believe is the greatest story of the universe. So that is personally incredibly exciting for us. We're obviously, looking forward to partnering with Mr. Nolan on his next film. And then there's, a multitude of different projects. We produced the Garfield movie. We got a bunch of animated films right now. We're producing the Angry Birds movie. We partnered with Legendary on a film called Animal Friends, which comes out later this year. So there's a lot of new and interesting areas which are also collaborative and partnering for us. That is not just being the services company, but also being a producer and a partner with some of our clients, which I think is incredibly interesting because we're able to now scale the use of technology, scale the use of our artistic capabilities, and really, partner up in a time in Hollywood where, again, there's a lot of unrest and a lot of changes. We're trying to be much more collaborative and more of a partner to our customers so that we can actually make more projects happen by leveraging our balance sheet and really pushing the cause of good filmmaking and storytelling.
Love it. Well, last question now before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
One of my favorite quotes is, fear is a constant, accepting it makes you stronger. This is a line that I saw in the movie 300, and it just sort of stayed with me. So every time you have your worst days, and when you define your worst days, I call it like it's the day where you've got anxiety or fear or the loss, the fear sense of loss. If you can align your energies to that, I think it really helps you overcome whatever it is that you're dealing with. And I think that's sort of incredible when you're in this journey of so much unpredictability and so much craziness that happens in the world. Like, you accept the good stuff, you accept the not so good stuff and say it's part of it's the two sides of the same coin, and just keep going.
Well, let's now move into the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one?
Sure.
Number one, what quote inspires you the most? Was it that one there?
Actually, it was fear is a constant, accepting it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
Or actually, I also said that one before, the Ayrton Senna one, which is coming second is being the first one to lose.
That's so good. Number two, morning coffee or evening wine?
Coffee morning and evening. I don't drink wine.
Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Just be the best version of yourself and just live life without limitation.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh that I've read a couple of times. And that's the one that I encourage a lot of people to read.
Any particular lesson that comes to mind from that one?
I think it really breaks it down for you and transcends all human life in a way that says everything that a human experiences and every emotion is down to love and fear. And it really speaks incredibly powerfully to anything that you experience, good or bad, is in either of those two boxes. And you sort of try and oscillate between that. And I think it's a great grounding and a great lesson for what you deal with in life on a day-to-day basis.
Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
I think this sense of not being very well read, not being knowledgeable. And I realized that while I was not someone who read a lot of books and did not have all the knowledge of the world and not up to date with news and what's going on, the current affairs, but I realized that I had tremendous instinct as a corollary to what I did not have. I had instinct. And while instinct is natural, you don't think about it. And I realized that being instinctive or intuitive became a much greater asset than reading pages and pages of information, because
learning to trust it.
Learning to trust your own instinct. And why do I feel what I feel? Why am I motivated by this? Why am I not motivated by that? So I'm much more internal looking. Like I look deep within myself to really evaluate why I feel what I feel, why I think what I think. And that really helps me get more clarity as a person.
I can see how that would accelerate your timelines for basically everything as well.
Sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
Oh, it's your greatest teacher. Everybody says you don't learn in success, you only learn in failure.
Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
I get a little emotional saying this. So my grandfather died very young. Sorry, I was very young when he died. I was only 3 or 4 years old, and he's been a great inspiration for me. So I'd love to hear about his journey from when he left what is considered Pakistan and moved to India, set up the whole family, and really pursued excellence, trained in color film, cinematography in the 50s, collaborated with Ernest Heller, who shot Gone with the Wind, and brought up an entire family and a whole generation and earned the greatest name. And so that's someone I'd love to hear more from.
Yeah. Very cool. Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Oh, it's my phone.
They're addictive, aren't they?
without a doubt.
Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
Oh, to drive a Formula One car? That would be something.
Yeah, I love it. And last question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
I just have this relentless pursuit of optimism. Nothing can bog me down beyond a point. I can feel the pressure and pain for a little bit, but I just ingrained in me to bounce back and fight back. The more someone tries to push me down, the harder I recoil back. It's just something that I don't know how it happens, but it happens. And I just hope I have that till the day I die.
Good quality to have.
Yeah.
Well, there are a bunch of ways to keep up with the work that Namit is doing, and I will link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him or his company on Instagram at DNEG, Twitter at DNEG, and visit their website, dneg.com. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. What a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, James. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.